Hey, welcome everybody. So glad all of you could today. It's nice to meet people. We have a few announcements, as we usually do. We will be continuing meditations, and that is 7 hours a day. We 4 to 7 a.m. 3 to 5 to 5. 2 weeks ago, I undersold it. I said it was like a reality TV show with none of the fun. But it is fun. So the new rebranding is this. It's stuff you do on your computer. Exactly. Percent Dhamma and 0% drama. So come join. You don't have to say a word. You don't have to say a word. You can just come and sit. That's what we do together. So we'll do that for another month. Next weekend, we'll be really happy to welcome Aya Santachitta, will be coming, founder of Aloka Vihara, and she'll be coming for the day. So you can tell your friends, and that'll be good. And I think Juanita has an announcement.
I just want to announce, to tell that we have to celebrate our Buddha Dhamma book reading done last week. The Buddha Dhamma books, the English book, 6th one, Ajahn Kovilu has some part in it too. So must be good. So we love it so much. We want to reread and start again. Start it again next Monday. So on Discord journals. This time we will go slowly and talk about, if you don't understand, we help to explain because we read it before. So please join us. Buddha Dhamma book from P.A. Payutto is hard. If you don't want to read the sutra, you got plenty in that book. Yes, it's very good book and answer what his life is in the Buddhist term and what is the process of life, what is the meaning of life, what is the goal of life, answer all of that in that book. So it's very good. I really recommend. Please join us. Next Monday started.
Actually, let's give 3 sadhus to that because it's a huge book. So sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Yeah. Thanks, Juanita. Matt. Oh, yeah.
And maybe at the opposite end of the spectrum, we're having games and discussion and Dhamma on the Bremerton Ferry this Friday night. And it's an hour trip over and an hour trip back. You know how those tables are perfect for discussion or games or whatever. The ferry leaves at 5:30 and we'll be back by about 7:40. And no restrictions on how many people can come. I don't think we can fill up the ferry. And you buy dinner on the ferry or bring it. Oh, sorry. Thanks.
And we would like to gently ask that everyone, to their greatest, to their ability, if everyone could try to stay seated between 9:30 and 11, and out of respect for the monastics, the people who ask questions, and the stillness we're trying to create here. So that bathroom's gonna be closed during the service, or whatever we call this thing, meeting, service, I don't know, we don't wanna, if that's the secular Buddhist in me and the other side. And if you expect that you will need to leave for some reason, for something else, please try and sit in the back, and the bathrooms are out that way and to the right, okay? Just trying to make this a little bit quieter place. Coffee can wait until after 11, and water or anything else, we all could just try and stay seated between 9:30 and 11 to the extent that we can. Seated or kneeling or whatever we call this other thing that we do too. Okay, thanks everyone.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. And I might invite people at 10:30 if they want to stand up just to change posture, just to get a little bit of variation.
You can stand up at 10:30, okay. No, we don't want to be prescriptive or whatever, but just to kind of calm it down a little bit here.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, let's chant together. Page 46 in the chanting book. This is the Sutta on the highest blessings in English, and it's one of the 3 main protective chants. So children in Thailand, Sri Lanka, Burma are memorizing this from a very young age. Page 46, a really beautiful sutta. Now let us chant the verses on the highest blessings. Thus have I heard that the Blessed One was staying at Savatthi, residing at the Jeta's Grove, in Anathapindika's bark. Then in the dark of the night, a radiant Deva illuminated all Jeta's Grove. She bowed down low before the Blessed One. Then standing to one side, she said, Devas are concerned for happiness and ever long for peace. What fame is true for humankind? What then are the highest blessings? Avoiding those of foolish ways, associating with the wise, and honoring those worthy of honor. These are the highest blessings. Living in places of suitable kinds, with the fruits of past good deeds, and guided by the rightful way. These are the highest blessings. Accomplished in learning and craftsman skills, with discipline highly trained, and speech that is true and pleasant to hear. These are the highest blessings. Providing for mother and father's support, and cherishing family, and ways of work that harm no being. These are the highest blessings. Generosity and a righteous life, offering help to relatives and kin, and acting in ways that leave no blame. These are the highest blessings. Steadfast in restraint and shunning evil ways, avoiding intoxicants that dull the mind, and heedfulness in all things that arise. These are the highest blessings. Respectfulness and being of humble ways, contentment and gratitude, and hearing the Dhamma frequently taught. These are the highest blessings. Patience and willingness to accept one's faults, seeing venerated seekers of the truth, and sharing often the words of Dhamma. These are the highest blessings. Ardent, committed to the holy life, seeing for oneself the noble truths and the realization of Nibbana. These are the highest blessings. Although in contact with the world, unshaken the mind remains, beyond all sorrow, spotless, secure. These are the highest blessings. They who live by following this path know victory wherever they go, and every place for them is safe. These are the highest blessings. Okay, so we can meditate together. And just as you bring the mind into a meditative space, see if you can let this sink in, that meditation is practicing choice. And so the first thing we do when we meditate, our first choice is to establish the body, sit the body in a position which is a posture conducive to a mental posture that we want to develop. So this is a posture which is upright, but not uptight. So the spine is up, and all the rest of the muscles of the body can just relax around this central column. You can imagine it as, say, like an Asokan pillar, a pillar that's buried deep in the earth, rising above the earth. Similarly, you can imagine just your base of solidity, even rooting into the ground. So this pillar of uprightness, with everything else relaxed around it. And having chosen to set the body in this very conducive, relaxed posture, whether you're on the floor or in a chair, choose to allow the mind to become similarly awake and relaxed. And if you have a meditation object you prefer, you can stick with that. But if you're curious, also just give a few words about another way to experiment with the breath. So bringing the mind to the in and out breathing. whether you're knowing at the tip of the nose, the nostrils, feeling the expansion and contraction of the lungs, or feeling the belly rise and fall, or even just knowing the breath in the whole body. Just let the mind rest on one of these bases. And for those who are curious, I'll just suggest a 3-word, 6-syllable mantra. Each syllable can go with an in-breath and an out-breath. And that mantra is Put on the in-breath, To on the out-breath, Dham on the in-breath, Mo on the out-breath, Sang on the in-breath, Go on the out-breath. Buddho, Dhammo, Sangho. It's called the triple gem. And these are words which point to qualities of mind we want to be developing. Buddho literally means awake. Dhammo is the truth, the Dhamma. And Sangho, the Sangha is a marker for love. When the Dhamma meets the world. So awake to the truth with love. Buddho, Dhammo, Sangho. And then back to Buddho. Allowing each syllable to perfectly align with the breath. So as we inwardly recite Put, can allow it to fill the whole in-breath, the beginning, the middle, and the end of the in-breath, and To, knowing the beginning, the middle, and the end, with wakefulness of the out-breath. Dham, Mo, Sang, Go. If those words don't work for you, no worries. You can just know the breath, or you can count. Or just use these qualities of awake, truth, with love. And we'll just sit, hopefully enjoying the breath for the next 15 minutes. And the more friendliness and love you can bring to this process, then the friendlier the breath will be to you. The mind is wandered off. You can just choose to come back. choosing simple breath. Buddho. Awake. Dhammo. Truth. Sangho. With love. In the last few minutes of a meditation, especially a group meditation, it's really helpful to practice metta or loving kindness. We're already with the breath. So in the next in-breath, you can just wish, may I be happy. And with the next out-breath, may all beings be happy. In-breath, may I be happy. Connecting with that heart sense of the truth of that wish, that hope. And with the out-breath, may all beings be happy. Sharing any well-being that we have, our happiness and well-being is not diminished, but actually increases. May I be happy, and may all beings be happy. All beings here, those in front of us, behind us, to our left, our right, above, below, around, and everywhere. No limits. The walls of the triple gym can't stop us. Soft in-breath, may I be well. And an increasingly soft out-breath. May all beings be well, without limit, abundant, exalted, immeasurable. I'll ring the bell. Let's see if you can choose to stay connected with the breath. Stay connected with this awakeness of Buddha, connection with valuing what's true, Dhamma, and valuing care and love for others, the Sangha. Hold it for the rest of our time together.
I'm requesting a Dhamma talk. Thank you. Brahmachilokaadhipati sahampati Katanjaliyanadivaram maya katha Santi dhasata parijakha jatika dese tu dhammam anukampimam pajam.
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. Thank you, Vandana. I think Vandana requested a week or so ago to be able to do that introductory chant. So there's a somewhat well-known list that you find in the Pali Canon. And this is the list of the Buddha's foremost disciples. So he actually, one after another, he gives this list of his foremost monk disciple in wisdom, who is Sariputta, his foremost monk disciple in practicing ascetic practices, Mahakassapa, his foremost bhikkhuni or nun disciple in wisdom, Kema, his foremost lay man disciple, Chitta, in giving Dhamma talks, his foremost female lay disciple in practicing loving kindness, and that is Sukhavati. And a list of just one after another, the 80 foremost disciples, the Etadaga, these are the highest. And you read it, and it does kind of read like a high school yearbook, superlative section. If your high school is just totally full of arahants and enlightened people. So a really cool list to learn about, because it's not like you become enlightened and you lose your personality, you lose all of your skill sets. When you ordain, these different individuals kept their inclinations. You have Kanka Revata, who is foremost in seclusion and jhana practice. So this is an extreme introvert. basically meditating all the time, loving seclusion. And then you've got someone like Ananda, who's the foremost in memory, foremost in being a personal attendant to the Buddha himself, somewhat of an extrovert. So this whole spectrum of human personalities that can become enlightened. It's a really inspiring list to read. But there's another list later on in the Anguttaras, the Book of the Fours, with a less known list of Etadaga. This is the foremost. And here the Buddha says, here is the foremost of among those who have influence. Here's the foremost among those who have authority or governing power. And who does he say? Does the Buddha say Donald Trump? Does he say Vladimir Putin? Does he say Xi Jinping, AOC, Chuck Schumer? He doesn't. He doesn't. He says Mara. Mara. Mara is the foremost of those who exercise influence, of those who exercise authority, this governance of other people. And that is scary because Donald Trump is not invisible, whereas Mara, is invisible, this invisible influence that can take over our lives. And it's good to pay attention to that. What are the external influences on our life? And the word that the Buddha uses there for influence, exercising force, exercising governance is adipateya. Adipateya. It's a Pali word. So I thought to look more into this word adipateya. So in English, when we create a new word in the sciences or in politics, we usually go back to Latin and Greek. So you've got all these different Latin and Greek, Latin-esque words for our different scientific and specialty names, especially, certainly in politics. Whereas in Thailand, Sri Lanka, Burma, Southeast Asia, they go back to Pali and Sanskrit, whereas we go back to Latin and Greek to make up new words, to figure out new words for concepts. They go back to Pali and Sanskrit. So whereas we have Dhammocracy, English for ocracy, rule of the Dhamma, the Dhamma, the people. In Thai, you have Prachātipade, the Adipateya, rule by the Paja, the people. Whereas we have oligarchy, rule by the few. Thai has Kanatipade, Adipati, rule by the Gana, by the small group. Plutocracy, rule of the wealthy. You have Tanapitipade, Adipati, Pali for rulership, by Dana, by those who have wealth. Kleptocracy, Choradipati, it's rule by thieves. So going back to Pali. So pretty interesting. Anarchy, Anatipati, rulership without rulership. So that's interesting. But you go back to the Pali canon. So Thai, like English, will take words from these ancient languages and kind of shift the meaning. And that happens in modern day Thai, Sinhala, Burmese, and in English. And so it's nice to go back to what is Adipateya? What is this idea of governance in Pali? How does the word specifically used in Pali? And what is the idea? What does the Buddha have to say about governance, governing principles? And it's noteworthy that just in general, the Buddha is not saying that much about external governance. He is talking to kings. He's in conversations, you read these, with King Pasenadi, King Bimbisara, King Ujjayi, all these different kings. He's a high-class teacher, and he's teaching kings in their courts. And you do find some suggestions about, which would be especially applicable to rulers, about being generous, but also just giving these rulers general conversation, advice about rulership is about purifying the mind. And it's somewhat similar to the trajectory that we find in this sutta on the highest blessings that we chanted. We see this progression of 38 different highest blessings in sets of 3 to 5. And it starts off on this very external rim, this external circumference of avoiding those of foolish ways, associating with the wise, and honoring those worthy of honor. So this is a pretty external, who are we talking to? Who are we getting our news from? This very much, this realm of the wise versus the foolish is extremely applicable, totally applicable to the websites we visit, the YouTube videos we watch, the commentators that we're listening to and believing. And so the Buddha starts on this external level, but he moves gradually inward to our livelihood. So we are cultivating accomplished in learning and craftsman skills. And then he goes on to the level of family, just increasingly intimate in closer circles, providing for mother and father support and cherishing family, getting closer and closer. And then when you get to virtues, say like 12 onwards, they're all inward-ish virtues. So generosity, an inward skill that we cultivate with others. Morality, an inward skill that affects other people. And getting closer, respectfulness, being humble, contentment, gratitude, hearing the Dhamma, patience. And then coming in the final verses to ardency, and realizing Nibbana, seeing the Four Noble Truths. So utterly intimate, utterly inward facing. When the Buddha, for the most part, is talking about governance, he's talking about inner governance. And you do find this in his specific use of the word adipataya. He doesn't use these words, choradipataya, rule by the wise or by the plutocrats or by thieves or whatever it is. He's using it dhammadipati, rule through dhamma, or siladipati, rule through sila, being governed, having this internal governing sense of morality, this internal governing sense of samadhi, samadipataya, panyadipataya, inner governing sense of wisdom. And really, that's the voice that we want to be tuning into more and more. So this brings us to the central question of life, really, is what is our inner governance system? Are we practicing and living internally in a Dhammocracy, Dhamma, democracy? Or are we living and governed by a Maratocracy? Maratocracy. Yeah, I'm a bit ruled by punarchy. I get a pun in my head. I'm even meditating, and I gotta take out my pen and write it down. It's just Maratocracy. Kovilo, you're so good, so good. You got to write that down. Got to write it down, and usually I'll sit with that for a while. Sit with the anarchy of the punarchy. But so, what is it? Are we living with governing principle of the Dhamma, a democracy, or through Mara, the inner influences, the Maratocracy? A word which the Buddha does use is lokadipataya. So that's governing, being inwardly governed by the sense of the world, or attadipati, this governing sense of oneself, both in a positive and in a negative sense. So sometimes in Thai, this attadipati does translate directly to autocracy. Sometimes autocracy is translated as rule through the self. So who is your inner autocrat if you're siding in this Mara vein? So hopefully we'll be able to talk more about what it would mean to have this inner Dhammic sense, this inner Dhamma pillar buried deep in the ground, which isn't buffeted about by the winds of the world. But before that, we'll go into a little bit of this Maratocracy, or this lokadipati, being governed by the sense of the world. And another fun list, which some of you might be familiar with, is the 8 worldly winds. Maybe just a show of hands. Who here has heard of the 8 worldly winds, or the 8 Dhammas? Okay, good number of people. The Buddha actually references it here in the highest blessings, but you wouldn't know if you're just reading the English. So he says, Puttasa loka dhammehi chittang yasana kampati. And the English translation is, although in contact with the world, unshaken the mind remains. So that in contact with the world literally is, when touched by the loka dhammas, when touched by these worldly dhammas, when touched by these 8 ways of the world, unshaken the mind remains. Chittang yasa nakampati. The mind does not waver. The mind does not shake. It's firmly rooted in the ground of Dhamma. So what are these 8 worldly winds, these 8 worldly Dhammas? It's 4 pairs. Okay, and I'll go this way. So you've got pleasure and pain. You've got profit and loss. You've got praise and censure. And then you've got prestige and loss of prestige. Okay, so that's the 4 P's on the positive end. So for the most part, oftentimes we're not coming from this place of Dhammocracy where we're searching for peace. We're coming from the Meritocracy, searching for the 4 P's of pleasure, profit, praise, and prestige. Pleasure, profit, anybody? Praise and prestige. Okay. So at this point, I will invite you all to become interactive with this Dhamma talk. So to figure out which one of these ways of the world, these worldly winds, and why does the Buddha, or why are they called worldly winds? It's because the Buddha says that the world follows after these 8 loka dhammas, these 8 ways of the world, and these ways of the world follow after the world. The worldly dhammas follow after the world, and the world follows after these worldly dhammas. It's a circle. And no one is immune to these, whether you're a totally unenlightened, anybody, or you're a fully enlightened Buddha. All of us experience pleasure and pain, profit and loss, praise and dispraise, and prestige and loss or lack of prestige. We all experience this, and we're all buffeted by them. What is the difference between an unenlightened person and an enlightened person with regards to these winds? Is that unshaken the mind remains of someone who's enlightened, or us, when we're able to see these winds and label them. This is just profit. This is just pleasure. This is just praise. This is just prestige. So invite all of you, these 4: pleasure, profit, praise, prestige. Now, look at yourself inside of your own habits, your collection of life habits. Which one of those can you let go of? Okay, so say as a monk, we just can't have that many possessions. So for me, I might say, okay, for me, I can let go of that possessions things. For me, it's not that hard. But for you, look at yourself. Which one of these 4 can you let go? Pleasure, profit, and that includes possessions, profit, praise, and prestige. And prestige does include power and popularity. So which one of these 4 can you let go? Pleasure, profit, praise, prestige. You got it? You've let go of 1. Now, what's the next one that you can let go of? What's the next one that you can let go of? And we're talking about let go to the mean level of society. So we're not saying abject poverty in the case of profit, or just utter total dukkha in the case of pleasure versus pain, but just the normal level on the pleasure pain spectrum, normal level on the profit loss, normal level of pleasure or profit, praise and censure, prestige and lack of prestige. Have you knocked off the next one? The next one you can get rid of without, okay, it's not too big a problem. Okay, get rid of, okay, yeah, normal level of pleasure. Okay, get rid of that. Or whatever it is for you. And now you've just got 2. You've just got 2 of these worldly ways remaining. And just look for yourself. Which one of those can you let go of? Leaving your main idol, O-I-D-O-L, your main inner Mara, your main inner autocrat, that which you become a slave to. Are you a slave to pleasure? Are you a slave to profit, possessions? Are you a slave to praise? Are you a slave to prestige and power? It's a fascinating look. Look at yourself, and you'll see tendencies in yourself. And ask your spouse. Don't try to diagnose them first. Maybe you can ask them. But it's a really interesting question to see the tendencies of one's mind. And Yet we don't have to be buffeted by these different winds of the world. We can be unshaken like this. There's a word, indakila. It's like a boundary pillar, which you would find in ancient Indian towns, somewhat like an Asokan pillar, which is buried at least half or fully as deep as it comes out of the ground. So coming to this place of unshakenness. There's a really beautiful poem by a Arahant monk named Godatta, where he talks about each of these. And he talks about it in the sense, the way that an Arahant would view these different worldly peas or worldly obsessions. So he says, with regards to the pleasure and pain spectrum, he says, regarding the pleasure from sensuality, the whole realm of sensuality, regarding the pleasure from sensuality or the pain, the dukkha, from renunciation, from simplicity, the pain, the dukkha of renunciation is better than if there were pleasure from sensuality. So the discomfort of being able to live simply, the discomfort that comes from being able to give away, the slight discomfort, that is superior to the pleasure of sensuality, which is so utterly, subject to changes that we can't totally control. So with regards to the next spectrum of profit and loss, Godatta says, regarding unrighteous profit and righteous loss is better than if there were unrighteous gain. So for the most part, certainly look out in the world, you read the news, and it's all about people seemingly delighting in and taking pleasure in, unrighteous gain. That's a lot of it. That's a lot of the news. And here, Godatta, and I think the Buddha would say the same, is that unrighteous loss is better than righteous loss is better than unrighteous gain. So look at that in your own life. We've got examples all around of us. There's a woman who used to come to our community. She's Nepali, came to a lot of our gatherings, was in a job that she didn't feel totally was in line with right livelihood. She realized that her sense of integrity was saying, actually, I don't feel right lying to get this job. But if I tell the truth, then I will lose the job. And so she chose the righteous loss and instead of the righteous gain of a livelihood. And she did have to go back to Nepal, but she seemed, hearing about it from her, it was a very bright story, a very inspiring story. So righteous loss is superior to unrighteous gain. In this next spectrum of praise versus censure, Godatta says, regarding praise from fools versus censure or blame from the wise, blame from the wise is better than praise from fools. So don't be a slave to the P of praise. What's much more important is who is giving that praise, who is giving that censure. Obviously, praise by the wise it feels better than censure by the wise. But the Buddha said you should regard someone who points out your faults as someone who points out hidden treasure. So praise from fools is inferior to censure, blame from the wise. So keeping that in mind. And finally, on this last spectrum of prestige, power, and popularity versus the opposite of that, just being lowliness, having no prestige, power, popularity, Godatta says, and as for regarding the popularity or prestige among those who do not know versus lowliness among those who know, the lowliness among those who know is superior to the popularity and prestige and power among those who are just ignorant, those who are ignorant. So looking at that, it really flips things on their head. For the most part, when we're a slave to these 4 Ps and are not going for peace, when we're a slave to pleasure and profit and praise and prestige, what we do is we revel in the P, in the positive side of thing, and we rebel against its opposite. We revel in the pleasure, we revel in the profit, all the possessions, all that stuff, all the praise, all the popularity and prestige from whoever. And then we rebel against, whether it's from someone wise, it's righteous or unrighteous gain, it's sensual or renunciant pleasure. We push against and we rebel against the seemingly negative, quote unquote, sides of the eight worldly winds. So can we, rather than that, what Godatta says earlier than that, before talking about these specific verses with each of the four sets, he says one can establish one's mindfulness like a boundary pillar. So like this indakila. And so that's what we were doing, hopefully, when we sat down to meditate, is allowing the body to be in this upright but not uptight position. And this is, the posture of the body does have an effect on the posture of the mind. When you see yourself, and it's just totally normal, we've habituated ourselves, advertising in the world and our families habituate us to non-discernment, to just wanting pleasure, wanting praise, no matter who says it, and just being totally, not at all paying attention to the source of the pleasure and the profit and the praise and the popularity. But here, it's natural. We'll get pulled in to wanting pleasure. It's just normal. A body leans towards pleasure. But we can come back to this sense of this inner balance, literally coming back to a sense of upright posture. And if this is through your daily life, if it's while you're watching the news, if it's while you're talking with your friends who have a different political persuasion, and you see the heat, you see the momentum, you see the inclination, the bending, reveling in that which you like and rebelling against that which you dislike, coming back up to this place of peace. And like we talked about last week, it's a deva mindset. You provide protection for yourself and protection for the other person when you notice that they're starting to get angry. When they're starting to get angry, I can mindfully hold my peace. I can come back up to this place of posture, of uprightness, grounded uprightness. And so what is a Dhammocracy? I think this sutta on the highest blessings is just a perfect and beautiful roadmap for living a life of Dhammocracy. And we can incline our lives to more Dhammocracy so that we ask ourselves at the end of the day, okay, was my day today, was it more democratic or meritocratic? Which way did I lean today? And you could say, actually, the tendency was one way or the other. And more importantly, we are habits, we are leanings, but we're also moments. We're moments, and we're more truly moments. So in this present moment, in this very next moment, can I live a life in line with the Dhamma, or do I have to be a slave to Mara? So just leave that question for all of you and leave the talk there, and just hope everybody can just look deeply. I asked someone last week how they were doing, what their practice was like. And they said, practice is going really good. And I said, what does that look like for you? Are you doing a lot of meditation on the breath, or what is it? And they said, no, I'm just practicing seeing truth. I'm just practicing seeing that which is true and that which is untrue. And that's how they describe their practice. So practice is not just on the pillow. It's our overarching worldview. It's our overarching balance and sense of balance in the world, and knowledge of our tendencies, knowledge of our own inclinations. So leave all that with you there.
Handhamyam Dhammakataya sadhukaram dadamase. Sadhu, 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 anumodami.
Okay. hope none of you are afflicted with panarchy. It's a malady. So now is the time for questions, or if you have thoughts, and also, yeah, if you wanted to stand up and shift posture, get a little blood flowing, that's totally cool. And if you have a question, Miles will bring a mic to you here. And if you have a question on Zoom, you can raise your hand and we'll come to you there. Yeah, please, Cliff.
Yes, in the Pali, is there any overlap between prestige and I think you said lowliness, and what's the opposite of prestige? Right, you have that pair.
Yeah.
Is there any overlap between that and shame and honor?
Yes. Yeah, Ajahn Nisabo and I were actually talking about this just yesterday. And so the ways of the world are things which are influencing us from the outside. So shame and honor in English have a meaning which is internal. Like I have an internal sense of shame. Whereas I think how the Pali for this prestige and lack of prestige is yasa or yot, which is a Pali word, yot, and ayot, ayasa. So prestige and lack of prestige. And it is more involved with the interpersonal or group interaction with an individual. So feeling honored or wanting to feel honored by other people, wanting not to feel shamed by others. I think in that sense, they're related. Yeah. So being shamed by others might be equivalent to that ayasa or the non-prestige, lowliness. Yeah. Joseph.
Thank you, Venerable. I'm really grateful for this talk. It was very helpful. I was thinking about specifically this week, I've been wanting to ask for help around one of the 10 virtues, non-virtues, specifically the mental non-virtue of covetousness. The definition was usually about, I don't have the thought, may his possessions be mine, right? And I had the question, what could possessions be something like non-material, like I want their time, I want their attention, I want their care? Would that also be covetousness? And how would you work with that?
Yeah, no, it definitely is covered by that. And this list of 10 virtues Ajahn Joseph is talking about are the 10 paths of wholesome action. So you have refraining from killing, refraining from stealing, refraining from sexual misconduct, refraining from lying, refraining from harsh speech, from malicious speech, from idle chatter, from covetousness, this, abhijja, from ill will, and from wrong view. So this covetousness does, in my understanding, really cover not just wanting other people's stuff, although, as you note, it is defined in a way extremely similar to the same or the similar aspect of the 10 commandments. So coveting thy neighbor's wife or possessions or livestock or whatever, that's how it is framed in this Pali particular, but it is, I think, more generally an umbrella term for that which is greedy, that which is craving for, and the vyapada, the ill will there, is that which is pushing against. So it's the reveling in and the rebelling against. So broader terms. But I think, yeah, you being creative and looking at that, I think is all of the things you talk about, being covetous of other people's attention and care, definitely falls under that. So being mindful of that and applying antidotes. So thanks, Joseph. Yep, let's go, Sid. Good to see you, Sid.
Ajahn, that was a very beautiful talk. So I wanted to say, when you started the talk, and it started with 80 Arahant and yearbook, and I was expecting something on that line, but then you quickly go down to another direction, like to Mara. That was really nice. Surprising, but yeah, it kept me giggling. So we talked about praise, and so when I first started practicing, I used to listen to a lot of Ajahn Brahm's talk, And one of the things he would say that basically the idea is praise, 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 and when in doubt, praise more. Or he'd say that flattery will take you everywhere. I think that's probably more for beginner level Dharma practitioners to more into getting into like not to find fault. And also I remember to listen one of the teachings that said like a fool's power is to fault find. Yes, right. And then also again, another really like this particular part of your talk that when you're saying that if someone points to you, finds a fault in you, basically is pointing to hidden treasure. So, I mean, I don't have any specific question, but it feels like I'm seeing the gradual progression of advancement of practice, I think. So maybe initially people can look into like, like praise and all those things, but eventually they want to develop more and they should be able to take the if a wise person actually pointing some shortcomings in me, I should be taking it more as a treasure, someone finding it, not like taking it as, oh, that person must be a fool because he's finding fault in me. So yeah, just that random thought.
Yeah, no,
But beautiful talk. Thank you, Ajahn.
Yeah, thank you. Beautiful question, Sid. One of a great Ajahn Chah quote is that if somebody calls you a dog, you just got to look. Is there a tail? And it is, yeah. So it is more important who's giving the praise, how you interact with praise versus how you interact with censure or dispraise. And the Buddha had a lot to say about this, like training one's sense of this. So the Buddha did say that when you are praising someone, you should praise the quality rather than the person. So rather than saying, he's a really good person, you say, oh, he practices a lot of generosity. So that's one thing the Buddha said about praise. There's another sutta where this Brahmin comes to the Buddha and he has a view, which he tells the Buddha, he says, I'm of the view that I neither praise anyone, good or bad, and I neither censure anyone, good or bad. What do you think about this? And the Buddha says, that's interesting, but for me, I praise that which is praiseworthy, and I speak in censure of those things which are censure-worthy. And he does it, both sides of that, at the right time. So paying attention to time and place for whether you're going to speak censure or praise. And I think, like you said, at the beginning of practice, I was really grateful when I came to live with Ajahn Pasanel, who really would, like a tiny word of praise, it goes such a long way. It goes such a long way, and it can really boost the people around you. And Ajahn Nisabo and I, part of our love language is praise. We praise each other so much. You wouldn't even believe it. You wouldn't even believe, we're like, you wouldn't believe it. We hardly see each other. I'm like in my hut, he's in his hut, and then I go over there to use the bathroom, and then like I come out and I praise him, and then he praises me, and it's like, hardly see each other, but it's like 70% praise. But it's good because like there is a positive response to praise, and we trust each other so that when there is like wise censure, we can hear it. It is like hidden treasure. So drawing near to people who are willing to be disagreeable, compassionate, disagreeable people can be the best teachers. Yeah. That last part. Compassionate, disagreeable teachers can be really helpful. So if you've got a 4x4 spectrum, someone who lacks compassion versus someone who has compassion, someone who's disagreeable versus agreeable. So you've got someone who's disagreeable and not compassionate. You don't want them as a teacher. Someone who's disagreeable and compassionate, that's a golden zone. Someone who's agreeable and not compassionate, meh. And someone who's both agreeable and compassionate, that feels really good. But sometimes the disagreeable, compassionate person can give more incisive feedback. So. Disappears? In what sense? Oh, disagreeable all the time. No. Yeah, do you agree? Don't agree. All right, there you go. Disagrees. Nice.
I'm wondering if there is a comparison between the Eight Noble Truths and the Eight Worldly Winds in the sense of how you practice them. So for example, I wouldn't start with jhana practice, right? That's more advanced. And I'm wondering if you have any recommendations as we think about how do we stand unwavering in the Eight Worldly Winds. Is there a similar sequential sort of building upon each other? Because I'm carrying, and maybe this is just my bias, but I'm carrying this assumption that pleasure might be the hardest, for me at least, to stand unwavering in. And so did the Buddha have any recommendation in terms of similarly with how one builds off each other with the Eight Noble Truths?
Yeah, definitely look into that, because I'm pretty sure he doesn't. There's no direct overlap, but so much overlap of terms. So this first spectrum of pleasure versus pain, it's sukha and dukkha. And for the most part, when we think of sukha or pleasure or happiness, we are thinking of worldly pleasure, because that's what most of us grew up with, the beautiful sight, sound, smells, taste, touch. That's what we want. And we don't want the pain that we receive from not having those. Whereas the Buddha doesn't say all pleasure is bad. In fact, he says nibbana is the highest sukha. Nibbana is the highest happiness. But also jhanas, so the eighth factor of the Noble Eightfold Path, really does. The first jhana, the second jhana, and the third jhana all involve sukha. So you're cultivating the practice of mindfulness of breathing. So right mindfulness, the 16 steps 5 and 6 are I will breathe in and breathe out, encouraging and training the mind in joy and in happiness, in sukha. Similarly with the formula for right mindfulness in this same chanting book is a explication of each of the factors of the Noble Eightfold Path. And you'll see in there the definition of right mindfulness is one pays attention to the body, feelings, mind objects, ardent, alert, and mindful, putting aside greed and distress with reference to the world. And that word greed there is the word that Joseph brought up, abhijja. So covetousness, putting away covetousness and grief, abhijja domanassa. So this is the uprightness that we're coming to. This is the pillar that's in the ground and isn't kind of pushed by the liking and the disliking. We having put away covetousness and grief for the world. Yeah, and with regards to right view, right speech, certainly speech is one which so much of our wrong speech is based around a sense of loss. If someone has caused us to feel a loss, the Buddha says in the simile of the saw, I do not praise someone who is easy to admonish or easy to speak to. I don't praise someone who's simply easy to speak to when they get everything that they want, when everything goes their way, when they get the robes, alms food, clothing, they get everything they want. But I praise someone who is equanimous, who's like that pillar, whether they get what they want or don't, they're still easy to talk to. So yes, speech is affected by these worldly winds, our actions. I mean, that's why we break precepts, is wanting pleasure, hating our non-pleasure, hating dispraise, hating the lack of prestige, hating loss. So yeah, keep looking into that. There's so much of this hyperlinked fashion of the Dhamma. It's like one term will appear in this list and that list, and they overlap and they intersect. And so very cool connection that I hadn't thought of before, but I think a lot there.
Yeah, thank you, John, for this talk. I was hoping today to talk to you about sort of how to cope with what's happening in the world externally right now, mostly politically, that's so troubling. And I think you addressed it through, explaining that who has the most authority over external governance is Mara. And And also thinking about in terms of how that could affect someone, what of those 4 positive worldly wind aspects, if you want to use the word positive, maybe that's the wrong word, you're willing to give up, in what order? Because a lot of the distress is the fear of how it's going to come down and affect each of us. But also the, kind of the sadness around all those who already are affected before us. So thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's good to note, as everything that you said, like the Buddha really is pointing internally, and to look at how we're affected by the ultimate effector, the ultimate influence of Mara, but also to note that other people are being affected by Mara as well. Those who are not like pillars, those who are not firmly rooted in principles of equanimity and kindness and generosity and care and consideration, but are just blown around by praise and blame. I mean, you don't want to be drawing near to those people as partners, as community, as government, in your choice of those people who you support in the various different roles that you have in your life and the various roles other people have. Yeah, looking the degree to which someone is swayed equally by those 8 worldly winds. And if they're just totally complicit and see no problem because it seems like they're at the top of the world, they're just getting everything, or it seems like things are going well for them, but underneath that, they're just completely complicit to whatever whim comes up. You don't want to be around. Those aren't safe people to be around on any level of your life. And if you have to, like if it's a child or someone in your immediate family, also deepening your roots into the ground. When you interact with those people, it's like, I really need to be rooted to provide protection for myself and protection from that other person. If they're off balance, I need to counterbalance their gravitational, swing with my own weightiness. So, yeah. Maybe just one more question or thought. Yeah.
Thank you for the talk, Ajahn. I'm sorry if I missed this, but I was wondering if you could explain more about what Mara is.
Yeah, I didn't go into that so much. Yeah, Mara, so Mara is the personification of evil, the personification of influence. And unlike the devil in Christianity, who's like hanging out in hell, like the leader of hell, Mara is a rebel prince up in the heavens of those who delight in the creations of others. So the Buddha, you read the canon, and you could definitely, if you were just totally without any bias coming to this canon, you would very much read that the Buddha is suggesting that this is a being that exists in the universe. But you can also, and in the canon, you do find Mara and other aspects, Mara as the aspect of thought. So Sankhara Mara, the Mara of thoughts, or Machu Mara, Mara, the fear of death, or Abhisankhara Mara, Mara of inherent change, or just Mara of influence, Mara of influence. And we were talking about this in one of our mission Majjhimas a few Sundays ago, and we realized that the YouTube algorithm, that's Mara. Yeah, that's Mara too. Totally this external influence, which is like playing on my likes, and it knows that I like this. It knows that you like that. And it gives you just the next, it's like an infinite scroll of samsara, basically. Samsara is infinite scroll, and Mara is the algorithm. So that's scary, everybody. Escape while you still can. Yeah, I think we should wrap up. Yeah. Well, at this point, we'll kind of shift to a different mode of kind of expanding the presence that we bring into the space. And on our website, we've got something called the chanting braid, or the requests for chanting. And maybe Trenton, could you read that? It's basically if you ever want to, if someone in your life is suffering or going through something, you can just go onto the website and you don't need any permissions. You could just add the person to that list and we'll read them, bring them into the space and bring them to our mind.
We have a request for Ajahn Nandiko, sciatica pain, spread meta. For Catherine, cancer worsening, spread meta. For Tammy, recent cancer diagnosis, spread meta. For Kathy, in hospice, from Alf Tan.
And if there's people here would like to bring into the space, yeah, Matt. Brianna and Erica. Yeah, please, Dory. Megan. Please, Jen. ALS. Great. Okay. Gail. Lisa. Okay. Julie's sister. Joseph and Catherine. Thank you, Gail. Kristen. Maria, recent cancer diagnosis. Dawn, who lost her husband. Thank you. Yeah, please. Bonnie and Julian, loss of their son. Yeah, please, Devin. Tamar, who just passed. Yeah, please, John. John, who needs a liver transplant. We can hold those names in mind for a few moments. And continuing with this practice in the chanting book on page 33, the verses of sharing and aspiration. So even if you don't know how the psychic mechanics of this work, just see if recollecting all the goodness and good intentions that have come into today, all our good intentions of generosity and keeping space for people, listening to Dhamma, practicing meditation, all of that goodness. See if you can transfer that and share it with all beings, all those who we named and all those who remained unnamed. We can chant this together, page 33. And people on Zoom can go to the link. Now let us chant the verses of sharing and aspiration. Through the goodness that arises from my practice, may my spiritual teachers and guides of great virtue, my mother, my father, and my relatives, the sun and the moon, and all virtuous leaders of the world, may the highest gods and evil forces, celestial beings, guardian spirits of the earth, and the Lord of death, may those who are friendly, indifferent, or hostile, may all beings receive the blessings of my life. May they soon attain the threefold bliss and realize the deathless through the goodness that arises from my practice. And through this act of sharing, may all desires and attachments quickly cease, and all harmful states of mind, until I realize Nibbana. In every kind of birth, may I have an upright mind, with mindfulness and wisdom, austerity and vigor. May the forces of delusion not take hold, nor weaken my resolve. The Buddha is my excellent refuge. Unsurpassed is the protection of the Dhamma. The solitary Buddha is my noble guide. The Sangha is my supreme support. Through the supreme power of all these, may darkness and illusion be dispelled. Okay. So if anyone is here for the first, second, or third time, if you would be so bold, we'd love to, if you'd be willing to maybe raise your hand and say your name and how you heard about Clear Mountain. If anybody falls under that 3-time or less rubric, yeah, please. Megan. Yeah. So good to meet you again, Megan. Sadhu. Oh, please.
My name is Sue Taylor. I am Hamsa. I am my devotee, so I have to.
Nice. And your name is Taylor?
Sue Taylor.
Sue Taylor. Okay. And you live here? Well, in Seattle. Oh. Yeah. Yeah. Cool people. Nice. Welcome. Oh, please. All right. Well, good to meet you, Solomon. Yeah, welcome. Please, yeah. All right, Jane. Thank you. Welcome. Thanks, Nick. Sadhu. Yeah. Cool. Welcome, Camille. Double Sadhu, Nick. Nice. Okay, so I think the most exciting time for some people is potluck time. And if you are so extroverted or wanted to try to exercise a bit of boldness, see if you can make the first, or at least one of the first people who you talk to be someone who you don't yet know. This is a really rich and beautiful community. So see if you can meet and say hello to someone who you haven't met yet. And there's potluck food all in the back. Everyone can help themselves, and people are always welcome to bring food. So this is just a bunch of people who come here on a regular basis and make food enough for everybody. So feel free to bring food in future Saturdays and to partake of the food this week. And for those who are inclined, and we do say it, you shouldn't feel pressure. It's a chance to bow for those who want to, but no pressure, no pressure. You can wave goodbye to people on Zoom. See you later, Zoomers. And I think people on Zoom can stick around for coffee time. We'll turn